Let's get it.
What is good with y'all? This is the Chop Up Show. I am Damo, the political plug, here on another Thursday, ready to chop up and chill, get it in, have this wonderful conversation, man. I am here with the wonderful, best co-host in the world, Toya G. She's also, our hoodie game today is on point. Go ahead, show them the hoodie, Toya. Research over me search. Research over me search. Hey, it's a lifestyle.
Consciously.com. No problem.
Consciously.com.
Right there. Consciously.com.
Right. Research over me search. It's a lifestyle, not a slogan. With that being said, we want to thank y'all for joining us for another beautiful conversation that we have built for y'all. Miss Ma'am is already in the building. We definitely appreciate you for joining us. Y'all know as y'all come in, make sure y'all say what's up. But without further ado, Toya, I think we should just go ahead and get into this, right?
Let's dive in face first. Let's do it.
Okay, so the first thing we're gonna talk about, what we're gonna call this, I guess today another political chop, huh?
Just why not?
Today, right? Hey, we ready?
First is always political. Everything is political. So let's
everything is political, right? Of course. So again, with today's political chop, we are discussing the first thing we're gonna talk about some wild shit that came out of Missouri. Now we are Missourians. And so, you know, I like to pay close attention to what's going on and where we at. And what's happening right now, kind of like what got everybody uproar now, is kind of depressing. It's kind of frustrating, and it definitely deserves a conversation. And so, Representative Mike Moon, out of Missouri, was having a debate. The Missouri state legislature was engaged in a debate over.
I want to be clear. Missouri is a very red state. Give you a little context for kind of how Missouri exists in the greater context of what states be doing. Didn't mean to cut you off. You were talking about Mike Moon. Take it away.
Right. So in this super red state of Missouri, Mike Moon, who is a representative in the state legislature, was debating one of his Democratic colleagues over a piece of legislation that was introduced that would possibly ban gender affirming surgery for children. As they were engaging in this debate, actually, instead of me explaining to y'all what it sounds like, I feel like y'all really should just hear this yourself.
I've heard you talk about parents' rights to raise their kids how they want. In fact, I just double checked. You voted no on making it illegal for kids to be married to adults at the age of 12 if their parents consented to it. You said actually that should be the law because it's the parents' right and the kid's right to decide what's best for them to be raped by an adult. Okay?
Do you know any kids who have been married at age 12?
That was the law. You voted not to change it.
Do you know any kids who have been married at age 12?
I don't need to.
I do. And guess what? They're still married.
Gentlemen.
Okay, so if y'all couldn't hear it, if there was some issues with your hearing at all, to be clear, Representative Mike Moon was called into question for voting against raising the child marriage age up to 15 or 16. And his defense of saying, like, yes, I voted against raising that age was to say, well, I know some 12-year-olds that's been married. His defense was to say that he knows 12-year-olds that have been married. Now, to be fair to Representative Moon, he is speaking about two 12-year-olds marrying each other.
No, I think that is not to be fair. It's to undermine his larger message that he's trying to portray as okay, which is that adults should be able to engage with children. Him leaving out that detail doesn't make it sound any better to me. It makes it sound like you are driving a very, very violent and problematic framework and relationship to that policy that doesn't even speak to the reality of the only shit that you're talking to. You just want us to really believe that it is okay and should be lawfully okay for a child to be with an adult. And that is disgusting to me.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that you make. The reason why I say it, to be fair, is because right now he's trying to clean it up. And he's trying to say, well, when I said that I know some 12-year-olds that got married, he's saying that I know two 12-year-olds who married each other and they're still married to this day. Now, granted, still wrong. Still wrong in every sense of right. I mean, because what the circumstances that he described was that the 12-year-olds were in a relationship, right? And again, we talking about the same people who say that everything else out there is sexualizing children.
Yeah.
The same people who talk about how in every instance that, like, you even had, they was talking about Huggy diapers is helping and working with pedophiles, right? But you have a conservative lawmaker that is looking his colleagues in the face and saying, yes, I think we should keep it at the age 12 because of this one obscure example of some people that I know. Ignoring the fact, like you said, that the law makes it possible for an adult to marry a 12-year-old.
Yeah. Which is the biggest issue, right? I think there are a lot of criticisms people can come up with 12-year-olds kind of getting into relationships with each other that are just like in general. There are a lot of people who criticize the idea of 12-year-olds getting in a relationship. But, some people wave that away as the, need for individuals to go through processes of maturation and there to be a healthy way for young people to build healthy relationships with each other. Cool. But I still think the idea of 12-year-olds getting married is also just kind of ridiculous. Like, in what ways does any 12-year-olds don't know how to be good brothers and sisters yet. They don't know how to be good siblings yet. They don't know how to be good kids yet, good cousins, good classmates. Right. How are you really trying to guarantee that somebody at 12 years old? And I'd also like to say there's 22, 25, 30-year-olds who don't know how to deal with and relate with and have the emotional responsibility to deal with a marriage to somebody else. So I know you're not.
I'm married at 35 and I'm still struggling. Shit, I don't know if I'm doing it right.
On top of the fact that the average 12-year-old, I mean, I won't say the average 12-year-old, but I will say, I think I got my cycle when I was 12 or 13. I was in like the 8th grade. I wasn't one of those like earlier bloomers that ended up with there. So you got people getting married that can have babies that young, and we know they don't care about kids when it comes to a question of how much pressure is put on younger girls' bodies when they end up having to be pregnant. So now we really know you double down on not caring about that shit. But also, secondly, is you have people getting married, and you said before the show, you talking about married like we don't know what married people do, right? So now you got people who can't even produce a child participating in the reproductive process or being legally allowed to do those things, but they're not even old enough to get their first period. Like, it just, what are we doing? And we're not doing shit. What are they doing? What is the logic? What is the thought process? And conservatives want to be known as like this parents' rights party, right? The ones that stand up for the rights that parents have. They want to be known as the ones who are really a part of agenda making that allows and reinforces and reinvites parents back into the driver's seat of how children, develop and come to be and exist in our society and in our world. But terrible parents. Y'all want to go first and y'all trash.
And what I think is just the greatest hypocrisy in all this, which I feel like conservative and hypocrisy is becoming synonymous at this point, is just that you have these claims and violence being enacted against queer people. You have people like literally running around with pitchforks trying to challenge what's it called, the reading hour, the reading where they read to the kids, drag queen. Because I wanted to say trans, but they wasn't trans. It's drag queen.
Nah, you can be a drag queen and not be trans. You can be trans and not be a drag queen.
So I'm trying to be clear. So like the drag queen reading hour is again, because I'm always going to talk to y'all about the culture war that we are currently engaging in. Right, there's a fight happening about culture. Conservatives are taking issues such as the drag queen reading hour and saying that they're sexualizing our kids.
Yes.
But y'all are literally saying that 12-year-olds should be allowed to engage in maritals. Because what ends up happening, let's be clear about how these types of laws work. If a grown man gets the permissions of a parent from the perspective of Mike Moon, and how he thinks legislation should look. If a grown man gets permission to marry a child at the age of 12, that means that any type of engagement that takes place in their home is legal. You're literally legalizing pedophilia. To say that 12 years old. Now, to be honest, I think even 15, saying that people could get married at 15, all of that's really like hella problematic to me. And the issue is that it's only like 7 states that have like straight up bans on child marriages. Most states literally give some type of permission to child marriage for like between the ages of 15, 16, etc. But like but 15, 16, 17, we still talking about minors, right? And so when you have a cult, like when you have like in a lot of these states are conservative states, they are red states.
I mean, I think all of them are. I don't think any of those states. Go ahead.
But see, but see the problem with California. California has no age exemption. Like literally in the state of California, there's no if a parent says you can marry this child, the state of California is like, all right, whatever age, that's your wife.
And see, but that's what lets you know, as much as we can couch this as a party particular issue, right? One that is consistent with conservative politics. We also have to recognize the overall freedom and flexibility that a patriarchally and male-dominated culture desires to design around childhood marriage, right? This is not a solely party-based, politic-based thing. There are other metrics or matrices of power, things like gender, things like sex, right, that allow for men who are largely making these decisions and are big parts of these conversations and are ones who passing this legislation to make it okay. I also think that it's very important to recognize that this whole 12 on 12 action, like a 12-year-old can marry a 12-year-old, is just literally probably in the minority of likely scenarios for how this shit plays out. Because if I'm just thinking about, I ain't got no children, but you in my house in 12 and married, and they in their house in 12 and married, that creates headache logistics. I don't think either one of those households, not saying it would never happen, but would run to be like, yes, y'all need to get married. We see the vision for y'all's love so far that we are willing to be in different households. Because you can't be 12-year-olds in a household. Then you just asking for the house to burn down at that point. So it's not like they moving out and moving into their own space. You likely will have to gerrymander some meaningful and very stressful arrangement for 2 12-year-olds to be married. So I don't even think that's the majority of the cases. I think laws like this are legalized so that old dirty men can go find young girls, take them back to households where then they're legally bound. You can't criminalize your partner, and there are certain legal defenses that you have from being married. There are certain protections that you have. And I feel like it is those situations where it's more likely that they want to go get married to them, take them away from the scope of the public eye and from people who can really kind of help them understand and identify things like abuse, things like violence, things like emotional abuse.
Exactly. Right? They're too young to know what those things are.
Exactly. And if I isolate you from your care unit, from your support unit, from the people who are able to make those decisions for you, from a mother or a parent that will be able to have you take a sit down after a rough date and say, oh, babe, what's wrong? Oh, he said, what? Oh, hell no, that person's, you skip over that whole part of maturation and development where people allow for you to see what a healthy relationship is, help you to understand what types of relationships are. And now you only get that context for the person you married. How much sense does I think it's wild, and I appreciate our folks in the comments, Hood Therapy, J Universe, for chiming in with us and kind of, sharing our frustration and disbelief in this, because I think that's what really makes the whole situation sad. Now, you showing us something, Plug, but it's a little glitchy.
Is it flashing?
It's doing like a
flashing
thing.
Weird. Yeah.
But okay, so what was it you were pulling up? It's better now. Talk to us about it. What's up, Winter Dragon? What's good with you?
Yeah, so these are all the places where it's banned with exception. It's 33 red states that is banned. So Missouri fits within the ban, but with the exception from 15 and up. Right? Ban with exception means that it's not allowed unless the parents say so, those types of things. There are 12 states where there is no minimum age at all.
Correct.
12 states, no minimum age at all. 4 states that that are banned without exception. No child marriage at all. Not happening. And so
those are Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota.
Right. The only ones that got it right. The only ones that got it right is Minnesota, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Child marriage should be banned. Period. And what's crazy is that this is the type of like violence that gets normalized that we don't have enough conversations about to know the actual detriment and danger of these types of things. Right? Like these things occur like with this many states having exceptions to child marriage. These things occur at a much higher rate than we would give it credit for.
I mean, and what I want to point out too, though, that I teach argumentation courses, I teach comm courses, so I have a lot of students give a lot of speeches over current events and current issues that shape our society. And I've actually, because of that, child marriage has been on my radar for a long time. Been having, I think every semester or so, I have a student who comes in, and it doesn't matter what gender they are, they're just people every semester or so for the last few years who have been like, wait till I tell y'all about this craziness happening right here in our own state and in this broader country. They really out here letting folk marry children. And so, it's been on my radar, but to hear somebody be so blatant about it in terms of the representative that, was the major part of this conversation.
Mike Moon is his name. Missouri representative.
I have no desire to indulge in, or that's why I need to say, what's his name again? That man who said that weird shit from the state of Missouri. Is one voice amongst many who thinks it's absolutely okay, not only for 12-year-olds to get married or participate in that institution, but shit, clearly it's 12 states or so that you can be 9, you can be 8, as long as your mama all right with it, as long as your mama and your daddy is smooth, then y'all can be out here doing whatever. So it's rough.
So then my question to you, Toya, is what does it mean for conservatives to go on this again, this culture war, challenging queer politics. Even you can have disagreements about what gender affirming surgery for youth, right? It could be a conversation to be had. But can you have that conversation when you're literally advocating for children to be able to be in like literal legal marriages? That means that the question of consent becomes very iffy. You feel me? Like even the conversation of raping your wife. You see what I'm saying? Like that becomes that much more iffy. And so like what does it mean for conservatives to have a perspective on sexualizing children when it comes to gender affirming surgery, but not when it comes to actually being engaged in like marriage?
I think that it means obviously that they are talking contradictions who are terrible at defending the needs of children as opposed to the rights of parents to determine what children need. And what's the scariest part of that there's not enough people to point out the contradictions. Like literally there are enough people that agree with them and affirm their politics. Or here's my favorite part, affirm so many other parts of Republican or conservative politics that they're willing to take the bullshit like this and run with it because it already aligns with so much more that's on the agendas of conservatives. And so what does it mean? I think it means that it's contradictory, but there are not enough people who agree with the lack of logic. There are just so many mental gymnastics you have to go through to believe in the conservative agenda to really invest yourself in conservative politics. I think that's what confuses me because y'all want to put kids first and y'all know what's best for kids and you know what won't hurt kids and what will help kids, but you will let these same kids go get shot and killed at their schools. Right? You know what's best for kids, you know what won't hurt kids, but you will let that same child die on a table. This same child that got pregnant from this old ass man, body wasn't ready to take it. You would have that same wife go into a medical facility and die on the table because they wouldn't be able to get an abortion to get rid of that child because their body wasn't built and made to have it. That's mental gymnastics.
That's an interesting intersection.
I'm just like it just is a very real
you can't run past that. The same people that will tell you that abortion should be banned in every instance.
Yeah.
Will also tell you that a grown man should be able to get a 12, 13-year-old pregnant, whose body has not, like Toya said, developed enough to where like childbirth is her body can deal with it.
Yeah.
So, man. So let me ask you. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm just
okay. So the next question I have is, as much as we hear in all this controversy that we hear from conservatives, do we take conservatives serious when they talk about protected, like over sexualizing children? Because they're the loudest voices, right? Like, I mean, and from the way that I would answer that question is that I think it's possible to take the sexualizing of children serious while not taking conservatives serious. Because what happens is when you call them in the question, what they try to tell you is that, oh, you don't care about the children. You don't care about what's happening to our children. Motherfucker, neither do you.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Because
this is what I think What's the Dragon is getting at. What's the Dragon said, not everything is okay as a parent. Like in Virginia, kids can get medical care without parents because of Christian Scientists. And so I think there's a constant battle, a constant back and forth to figure out just what you having had a child makes you, and it puts you in a good position to decide about. Or just because you had a child, what equips you or qualifies you to make half the decisions you make in anyway. Right? But my bad. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just thought that was a good kind of connection to what you were getting at.
So how would you articulate like disagreeing with conservatives in their approach to defending children, but then at the same time it's still like letting niggas know, like, yes, sexualizing children is a bad thing, period. Right? How
ask the question again.
So this is what happens. The same people that will allow for 12-year-olds to get married, they're the loudest about sexualizing children right now. They have, and when I say the loudest, I mean they get the most mainstream. Right, every time they get an opportunity, they talking about Democrats are sexualizing our children. There was recently a controversy surrounding Huggies diapers. They said Huggies diapers were pointing children out for pedophiles. And so how do you then, like, as a debater, as somebody who's able to, make some pretty decent argumentation, somebody tells you, Toya, y'all don't, as a leftist, y'all don't care about over sexualizing children as a leftist, because this, that, and the third, like Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's laptop and Pizzagate, right? That all of that take place. Y'all don't care about the sexual, like over sexualizing children. How do you respond to that? Not like knowing again what's happening.
Because I think you're trying to. How would you respond to that? Because I mean, to me, I say this is, and the reason why I toss it back at you is that I feel like this is the current debate and conversation. There has been you don't really know about kids, or you don't really care about kids, or you don't really put the interest of kids first. And I think liberals are able to turn around and say that same thing. And so I'm trying to figure out in what ways we resolve that debate and that back and forth in that argument, because it's the same argument being made on both sides, right? And I think that there are concerns that conservatives have that they've been able to twist and kind of turn into a desire for there to be complete lawlessness when it comes to raising kids, where nothing is out of boundaries, this, that, and the other. But we are saying the same thing about what we see in their politics. So I guess I'm turning the question back on you and saying, as a debater, what would your response be to the tension within those two positions?
Y'all niggas don't give a fuck about kids.
Right.
That was down straight up. Like that's my response. Y'all niggas don't give a fuck about kids. Like the whole y'all are looking for opportunities to be able to just like throw some shit on your political enemies.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Like the whole child conversation, just like the whole CRT conversation. Because remember, they trying to tell you CRT bad for the kids. They're trying to tell you that CRT teaches children to either hate themselves if they're black, or white students to hate themselves if they white, because like y'all both are just bad. That's what they try to tell you and try to explain CRT as, which that ain't it, right? But so when people when they're trying to bring this conversation to the forefront, it's like, no, y'all got me fucked up. I'm not even about to take the shit that y'all on serious. Like, you really trying to talk to me about kids, but you live in like, if there's no outrage about what Mike Moon said. Y'all like, well, nah, he didn't mean, nah, fuck that. Even 12-year-olds getting married, period. Even if a 12-year-old marries another 12-year-old, if y'all allow that, if y'all set that up, if two sets of parents let that be okay, all four of y'all are fucked up.
Yeah.
And then every politician that think it's okay for them to do it is fucked up. Y'all are okay with sexualizing children because y'all put them in relationships where sex becomes the norm. What does married people do? Like I could make a joke about, yeah, well, married people actually.
Yeah, but no,
but I'm not gonna do that.
Irrelevant.
I'm not gonna be funny about it. But what does marriage makes sex acceptable?
Yeah,
marriage makes sex acceptable. If a grown man marries a 12-year-old, if a 12-year-old marries another 12-year-old, regardless of the circumstance, 12-year-olds are engaging in sex.
Yep.
What was you about to say?
Well, LaRon is in the comments kind of chiming in with us. And one of the things that they said is that most Republicans don't care about kids. These fuckers only care about power and authoritarianism. And that is really, I think, well, as we look at this debate about who really cares about kids most, Republicans or Democrats, conservatives or liberals, I think that the one place that liberals really are ahead of them in terms of how they care about kids is the fact that at least the positions that they stand for are rooted in objective science and research over research that actually describes or explains the justifications for the decisions that they're making. An example, I'll give you one. Today, I believe I heard that the state of California defended a decision to not force students, and this might not be the state of California, it might have been a particular district, but voted to defend the ability for students to be out if they are trans in school without having to be out at home, right? Like, or that the school can't force parents to know. There was a policy on the table or that was being voted on or something like that said that if trans students were out or transitioned at school, they automatically had to have parents notified about their transition. Like their parents have to know that they're being outwardly transitioned at school. And that was the conservative perspective and criticism, that your kids should not be able to be trans and be out and be transitioned at school, and that whatever they are, whoever they are, ought to align with what's happening at home. Now, a lot of parents are out there like, okay, I actually, I do want to know, old school people outside of being trans, we used to walk out the house in one thing and then come back home in another.
Change
right?
Your whole fit. Yeah.
I know my homies definitely, like, I mean, I wasn't the girly girl that was going to walk up and, have one version of an outfit on and then put on another version, but my friends did. And I definitely know my friends that were guys.
The guy version of that. Oh, yeah, I'm putting my pants down. Let me bust that side.
Listen, you know what I'm saying? I was just like, I know for a fact y'all had them belts on, yanked them over real tight, had the shit pulled up. And then we got to the schoolhouse and that shit was nowhere to be found. And so, but what we see, and one of the reasons why that particular policy change was not able to be defended, is that what we see is the reason why that policy change wasn't able to be defended was that they called on the research about trans students or trans kids and recognized that sometimes and a lot of times in their transitional phases of their young adult lives and in their lives in general, some of their biggest bullies, some of their biggest threats, some of their biggest sources of violence are in the home itself. They don't have trouble being their true and full selves out in the community and in the world. School, They struggle with the targeting, bullying, and violence that they get at the crib. So again, research, science, studies over time, understanding the experiences of trans students, the reason why they decided to defend students or to protect kids by saying they didn't have to tell their parents about transitioning. Now let's look on the other side of this issue. You have this whole conversation about parents' rights to determine when kids get married at 12. And what's the logic behind that? What's the support for that reasoning? What objective research, what scientific information, what peer-reviewed kind of sources or research is being used to justify the need for a 12-year-old to get married? I ain't seen none yet. Outside of the delicate kind of protection we try to have for other cultures and their norms, and ways that, you know what I'm saying? We can't be overly xenophobic and castigating other cultures, so you can do that shit over there. We're just not gonna do that over here. But besides that, what justification do you have?
Yeah, I'm sorry. None. Even because, and that's what I agree with what you just said to the umpteenth degree. like religion is not an excuse to marry a child
at all.
Your spiritual background, your spiritual belief is not an excuse to marry a child. Those things just are not they're not conducive, right? Like I mean, I think there's a biological reality, and then there's a moral standard to where we've reached a place in society with a part of the reason why we moved away from our religious control of our society has to do with the fact that what certain religious perspectives allow. And I ain't gonna go too far because we're about to move on to the next part of the conversation. But the one thing I do want to point out is that, for example, when Mike Moon, and I wasn't trying to pull this up at that moment, but I did want to show this screen real quick again, just the article, so people will know who we talking about. So when you talking about, I need to talk shit to my legislator, this is somebody you need to talk shit about, right? Especially if you live in a Republican district. And that is when you have the thing that we need to make sure that we have a full understanding of is that these are the people that dictate how our communities are ran, how our communities are operated. And so when we start having conversations about like what's allowed in the home versus what's allowed in school, right? Like what protections exist where, you feel me? Like I said again, when we're dealing like these issues of gender, issues of race, issues of sexuality are so subjective that they require debate to be understood, right? Like I feel like me and Toya, y'all know how tight we are, but at the same time, amongst these issues, we have strong disagreement, right? So it's like, I mean, in terms of like race and other things, like
to be clear, we agree on this. You should not be able to.
We agree on this, though. You feel me? We agree on this. Children should not be able to marry. Period. Like I think like that's the place where we have to get to where there are certain things that aren't up for question. There's certain things that aren't up for debate, and whether or not a 12-year-old should be engaged whether or not a 12-year-old should be in any serious relationship, right? I wish I would have came home telling my mama as a 12-year-old I got a little girlfriend. That don't mean shit to her. She's like, but that's some school shit. That is not real. That's not serious, boy. Whatever. You know what I mean? And then that's even more problematic because we can get into how boys, like I never had, like if I wanted to say I had a little girlfriend, people just thought that was cute. Right. But if my sisters would talk about that type of shit, then it would be like, girl, you being fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it's like, so these gender politics are much deeper than the way that conservatives treat it and the way that they try to present it. And while conversation is important, what we don't need to be conversing about is whether or not 12-year-olds should be engaged in actual serious relationships that we call marriages, when we are already saying that children at the age of 12 should not be sexualized.
That's I mean, you can't have it both ways, right? At 12, you can't do anything out in the world under your own name, even being emancipated. No reputable establishment is going to participate in that foolery, said Miss Ma'am in the comments, which speaks a whole lot to what the point is, what you set these people up to deal with or having to experience if you justify these relationships. I was going to ask a question like, so Dominique, do you think that it'd be more realistic if, the law was limited to like 2 12-year-olds, like you got to be 12 in order to marry another 12? But no, I don't think the law should say that silly shit either. I think you should wait until you can take on every other responsibility codified by law. Because here's the thing that blows my mind about,
if you can't smoke a cigarette, you shouldn't.
You know what I'm saying? Like, how if you can't consent to a whole bunch of other shit over here, how can all of a sudden you consent to shit over here? Like, I don't understand. This is all in the world too, where we know the age of 18 is arbitrary because the brain doesn't start developing or stop developing until between 25 and 27. Right? So there's a bunch of things that I would even argue that even 18-year-olds shouldn't be able to do, but that's the line everybody chose. Why not stick to that one? What logic, what sense does it make to start picking out and parsing out and all of a sudden assuming that people are more ready at this stage to do this big life-altering, changing things, but they're not old enough in this world to do these big life-changing, life-altering things? Like, the logic just doesn't add up. That's really, I mean, beliefs and politics and morals and ethics aside, values aside, I just like shit that makes sense. I think that's what perplexes me about conservatives is, and a lot of people who defend any line or any stream of thought that can be woven back to their particular school of thought, is that shit just don't be making sense.
Don't be making sense.
Really don't be making sense. I think just even outside of what I believe
about the other shit.
There's just no consistency there.
And they be loud about the other shit. The other shit be very like it's not quiet, right? It's not like they're just like, hey, we need to make no Pizzagate. Somebody got shot over that shit. There was a nigga who showed up at a DC pizzeria with a gun.
Yeah, over
Pizzagate. They not playing about that. But y'all got politicians that literally look at they look at a 12-year-old and say that's marriageable age. So to put a cap on this part of the conversation, we can't allow conservatives to run with the "we protect children" narrative when you have child marriage so rampant throughout this country. I mean, they even like as much as they hate California, they all they gotta say is like, hey, California, you don't have a child, hey, you can get married as a child in California. You can get married as a child in California. That's all you got to say. But they not even focused on that, which tells me that it's more about like these made up stories. It's more about the conspiracies than actually addressing what children are actually what really going through. Because while they're doing like exposés on Planned Parenthood, how about we understand the role that or the circumstances that are being created for children in California? Knowing that if your parents say that you can get married, that you done for.
Yeah, you done.
Right? Like y'all trying to like, and this is a tip, conservatives. Y'all hate California. Bring up the fact that there is no legal age where a parent can say hey, a 6-month-old, hey, you can have my 6-month-old married. Boom. in the state of California, that's a possibility. Yeah. So if y'all want a reason to get on a high horse, you have one. But the reason why we know that y'all really don't care about this shit is because y'all don't even take the low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, we can transition into the next part of the conversation.
Before we transition over, I want to let the folks listening know that next week we are going to take a little break, a little pause, a little moment next Thursday, 4-20. It's the plug's anniversary. So we're going to let the plug have some time off to handle that business. I'm going to take some time and recalibrate and do some things. And we're going to gear up for the last week, the 27th of April, to come back. They've been married for 5 years. Y'all been together for what, 8? Outside of
that ain't shit. I know we've been together for like outside of the 5 years being married, it's like 12 years.
Well, time bit on the clock. So just know we won't be here next week, the 20th, but we'll be back on the 27th to continue to chop it up with y'all. Let's go ahead and transition into the next conversation, Plug.
So let's talk about the Justins in Tennessee. Ain't no Tennessee 3. The white woman did not get expelled, so she is no longer a part of the. So for y'all who don't know, what happened in Tennessee, it was two brothers, Justin Pearson and Justin Jones.
Well, let's talk about why we even know who they are. What event transpired in Tennessee that led up to this particular issue?
Exactly. So there was there was a shooting at a Tennessee private school, where I think it was like 6 people killed.
Yeah, 3 kids, 3 adults, 3 9-year-olds,
3 kids,
and 3 adults. And
it was and so that took place. The Tennessee legislator, there are 2 specific black legislators in the Tennessee state government who participated in protests to call out the conservatives who refused to pass common sense gun legislation.
Right.
So when they participated along with another white woman, when they participated in these protests, the conservatives got so mad and so offended. They was clutching their pearls. It was like, he called us a liar, and he was talking on a megaphone, and he was being mean. So they expelled Justin Jones and Justin Pearson from the Tennessee state legislature. The white woman who was up for expulsion survived by 1 vote. So, and the funny thing about it, that one person don't even recognize you the most racist motherfucker out of all of them. Yeah, because everybody else would have got rid of the white woman, but she was like, nah, she white. Let's save her.
Let's keep her.
So
it's bad.
So there were 2 that were expelled: Justin Jones, Justin Pearson, and recently, within the past, like this week, actually, both of them have been reinstated by their constituents. Justin Jones.
To be clear, I was just gonna say, to be clear, it caused a lot of social outrage too. Like there wasn't a decision that they got to make that people accepted quietly. There were a lot of bans. There was a lot of social media conversation. Me and the plugs, one of our favorite slogans that came from the issue was "No Justins, no peace." Right? No
Justins,
no peace. I saw that on signs and stickers and all types of things because we are just such a witty group, a witty audience, a witty society. But
y'all can't fuck with niggas, man. We the funniest people out here.
Just want to be clear, it wasn't an issue that evolved silently. Y'all probably and most definitely heard about it, right?
Right. And so, so like, these Justins have, like, because what these conservatives don't realize, I actually made a video, if y'all have seen it. I had some audio issues, so I'm gonna re-upload it after I handle the audio issues. But y'all seen us talk about it, but it was a lot of uproar. These conservatives turned these two Justins, I call them the Justins, the Tennessee Justins. They in the national spotlight now. They national heroes now because they've been persecuted by their state government in ways that just don't make sense given what it was that they did. So the pettiness of conservatives led to creating two new black political heroes in Justin Pearson and Justin Jones, because the people got their back. What's happened recently this week, as I said, is that they've been reinstated by both the Memphis and Tennessee, or Memphis and Nashville, the districts where, or the areas where those two come from.
Yeah.
Though the city councils in those areas voted to reinstate them up until this next election. So they're technically considered interim, interim representatives, even though they just took their own seats back. But they got to get those seats back in this election coming up next year. But what's been interesting about that though is once they got reinstated, I feel like niggas started to like that. I guess when like us as black people, like niggas started to be like, all right, bro, like these niggas is, you know what I mean?
I wouldn't even say once they were reinstated. These conversations they were evolving during the when they were put out, right? I don't know why that word continues to
expulsion
when they were expelled, right? I have to use my schoolhouse language. And so I was starting to see like some, just like crystallizations of niggas being interesting toward the situation and toward them as a result of those issues, right? So I think there's been a lot of, as they've driven and written the course to national coverage and national representation and visibility, I've definitely been seeing chatter throughout. So I don't want to make it seem like the conversations were starting after, because that was just a couple days ago. But I just want to kind of clarify. Niggas been talking. The streets have been talking.
So Toya and I also have been talking, and this conversation, like, so we had talked about what we felt about how the Justins kind of like presented themselves. You feel me? There were certain things that we looked at that we thought were right for conversation, but then at the same time, because of what they were going through, I think both of us. We measured folks. We not real social media people. We don't create controversy in the ways that most social media people like to create controversy. And so we was like, let's we gonna chill on it. You know what I mean? We gonna let their scenario and situation play out, but we don't want to come off as voices that are in opposition to what these brothers are trying to do. Because ultimately, politically, we all have similar goals. As soon as me and Toya had this conversation, Black Twitter was like, "Nope, fuck that, fuck that. Y'all cannot talk about that shit." Because the very next day, Toya sending me shit, and everything her and I talked about, Black Twitter was erupting over. And so, real quick, I want to show y'all a couple videos that kind of speak to what Black Twitter was speaking to before we look at a few tweets. So I first want to start with Justin Jones. This is Justin Jones singing "We Shall Overcome" with a folk singer who marched. I think she like sang with Dr. King. Like she was a part of the civil rights movement.
Was very muchly about like fights, like anti-war songs, songs that question the social consciousness, songs that wanted to rally to get each other, to get people together and really unify. That was a lot of the texture of the message. We know during the 60s, we're looking at everything from the Vietnam War to challenges to Jim Crow laws and, recalibrating what it means to have justice in this country. So a lot of different conversations at one time. And she was a present voice, a folk singer who was attempting to spread through her craft messages of freedom, peace, liberation.
So, this is Justin Jones singing "We Shall Overcome" in the airport.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I know that I do believe we shall overcome someday. Fear is moving.
Okay.
Well, so listen, I'm gonna tell y'all what I told the plug. One of the things that pisses me off the most about this video was that he let her take the runs. She said, "Oh, deep." But
she is the professional singer, so you got to let her take the runs.
Sure,
you got to let her take the runs. Okay.
Targets. But hey.
So it's 2023, and niggas is singing civil rights spirituals.
Yes.
Okay. Justin Pearson. Let's take a look at how he expresses his political activism.
Clearly on the steps there in Shelby County, the Shelby County Commission that just again voted back Justin Pearson to.
But the white woman shows up like, yeah, so clearly a celebration.
Right.
So even when they were, because I think they're gonna call it his Justin Pearson. Shout out to Conscious Lee. He was like, Justin Pearson's "In the Well" speech will go down in history. And it was a very spirited speech, but as you can hear, he had that pastor. He's speaking to
the diction.
Yes. You know what I mean? Yeah. So and he had the ad libs though. Like he had the whole.
He had the diction. He had the ad libs. He had the vocal inflections and vocal intonations. The whole nine.
The whole 10. But what Black Twitter had very interesting reactions to that shit though. You know what I mean? So before we get to Toya and I, the first thing I want to point out is that the Chop Up Show strongly supports both Justin Pearson and Justin Jones. They were unnecessarily and racistly, if that's a word, I'm gonna make it an adjective. I don't give a damn if it is not. In a very racist fashion, they were persecuted in the Tennessee House of Representatives. Period.
Yeah,
that the Tennessee legislature. What happened with they should have never been expelled. They should have never had to be reinstated. And what they were doing were engaging in their First Amendment right to protest. And actually, the expulsion of Justin Jones and Justin Pearson's actually represents an infringement on their First Amendment rights. So let's get that clear, right? We support the Chop Up Show supports Justin Jones, Justin Pearson, but we real niggas though, and this ain't no echo chamber. And as much as we love each other, we would if I can tell Toya where I disagree with her, and this is my dog, This is my sister. This is family. We can talk about these Justins. But before we get into the way that we look at it, I do want to look at some very interesting tweets that were in response to what was going on with these brothers. I want to get to the first one that kind of spoke to like the diction, right? That's because I don't want to call it a performance because I understand what was taking place, and it's much more significant than just labeling it as a performance. But I want to start with this first tweet to help us kind of understand where the disconnect between Black people is, because we ain't no monolith, right? Things are
not at all.
We're different in how we see things. So let me get this pulled up. Bear with me just a second. I'm on the wrong screen here.
Two, I think while the plug is kind of pulling it up, I want to be clear about my position of, and I think that's going to come out of like uncertainty. I don't think it's a matter of sides to be taken in any of this because we're just happy that they have been reinstated to be able to do the job that they were elected to do. But I think so much of people's responses and the conversations we're having about the displays that Justin's put on are like, is that shit old and antiquated? Where does Christianity and faith really fit into the conversation, let alone the role of our policymakers and the people who make decisions, especially the ones who claim liberal politics? We know what faith and religion what role it plays for conservatives, but I don't think we often see. We see Black spiritual leaders and Black spiritual people, but we don't really see young Black, very religiously inspired individuals on a regular basis and how they feel their position. So it's just a lot of back and forth about how we deal with and how we interpret and value a lot of that shit. But you got the first tweet pulled up. Let's look at some of these tweets.
And that's why I want to be clear too about the plug. I was a youth pastor coming up.
You was both
Matter of fact,
youth leaders in the church.
Yeah, man, like Toya was much deeper in the church than I'm pretty sure I was. But like every church I went to, it was my family's church. Mm-hmm. Like my great grandmother, my grandmother, my father, we all grew up in the same church. So and it was St. Matthew AME Zion Church. And if you know anything about AME Zion churches, them came out of free slaves. Them was Black people taking control of their own spiritual understanding, even though it was still Christianity. Mm-hmm. And so J Universe said that religion would be a red flag for me. We're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about it, J Universe. That's why I want you. I want your input, Miss Man, Winter Dragon, and everybody else watching. I want y'all input because we're gonna take a look into how certain people, like us as Black people, are responding to this display. And so first we have here from Drew comments on Twitter. Y'all see, I ain't logged into Twitter because I don't be on Twitter like that. Toya sent me this, so let's go ahead and get into it though. Drew comment said the Justin Pearson stuff has shown me that a lot of Black people on Twitter didn't grow up around Black people. Toya, what is he speaking to?
I mean, I think he's speaking to, and I don't know if he's correct in this assessment, but he's speaking to like the traditional Black church experience, the traditional Black spiritual experience that is part and parcel with a lot, clearly not all, obviously not all, but a lot of Black people's, Sunday morning, weekly routines, and whether or not they still do it to this day remains in question. We know that often, a lot of different demographics in the 2023 world, a lot of people in the United States are less religious when it comes to participating in religious services and going to church. But at some point in their maturation, they had experienced what we saw basically at Justin Pearson's announcement of his reinstatement, which is very boisterous celebration, repetition, Southern Baptist diction, and a really very familiar relationship with
in Tennessee,
expressions of excitement, right? A little bit of shouting, a little bit of screaming, a little bit of hollering. He came about that jacket real quick. And what he said, what Drew comments, I think, is also getting at, is I saw in a couple of different places people saying, he was trying to act like James Brown. James Brown used to come out of his clothes and do his thing and throw his hand back and do whatever. And it's like, comments like that let you know that not everybody grew up in the church. Not everybody has that frame of reference. Not everybody thinks to or points back or connects that back to something that they've seen. And so I get what he's saying. I don't necessarily know if I agree. And I think that the comments like these are what turn Black people into a monolith or one, homogenized group instead of the very diverse group that it is. But I see what he was getting at.
So, in response to your specific criticism, just about and his criticism and what he was getting at, Anthony Hegler on Twitter said, grew up in the black church, and I dislike the 1963 voice."
Right.
So, and then the comment up under it says it was too coordinated to be a coincidence. Looks to me like a lot of them got talking points from somewhere. Money talks, will sell their souls to get it. Now, I'm not going that far, right? That second comment kind of takes it to the conspiracy level, but that first comment kind of speaks to more of the conversation that you and I was having about growing up in the black church and still being like, nigga, it is 2023. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, well, like I mean, if we still trying to do the Creflo Dollar, like, all right, but you know what I mean?
You see, for me, that was my original criticism. And like when I sent it to you originally, I was just like, what year are we? What year is this? And I think with the other Justin, with Justin Jones, I very muchly am still kind of, and I think that's something we got to circle back to, is like, I think the year is more relevant in terms of time and timing for that particular strategy of singing Kumbaya songs in the airport and shit. But when I think about Justin Pearson, I think, and I kind of pulled away from that criticism of being like, bruh, like you kind of trying to do it old school, because it's the South. It is Tennessee. It is a place where his family and his background and his upbringing is very much rooted in the church. And I feel like, if I'm not mistaken, I saw reports of him having intimate relationships with spiritual leaders who are in his family, growing up a certain particular way, and even having his own background in preaching or public oration that has always kind of had tinges of that in it. And so while there were a bunch of people posting videos, well, why does he talk like this in these instances and change his voice in these instances? It's because real preachers, when they go home, they not like, hey, can I have some chicken? Can you turn that light off before you go upstairs? Hey, did you lock the front door? Nobody's talking about like that all the time. But when individuals from a certain background want to speak emphatically, from the South in particular, with that rich Southern Baptist tradition, that's what you're going to get out of them. And I think that kind of has to be all right. I don't think everything has to be usurped and grouped and scooped as a comment. I mean, as a performance, as much as it could be understandable of just people being who they are. And I never want to take away the possibility of people. And I mean, we got actors, we got pretenders, but I feel like at those heightened moments of passion and of adrenaline, the real version of people often jumps out and leaps out, even when they don't necessarily naturally go there. You know what I'm saying? So I feel a way about completely typecasting him as a caricature of what he should have been, because I feel like he was just in his bag. You know what I'm saying?
So let me ask you this. Do you think it's fair? Because you said caricature, but I'll use this word, political theater. Do you think it'd be fair to look at their brand of political activism as black political theater?
I don't think it's fair, because when we talk about political theater, we're talking about the putting on, the embellishment, the theatrics for the sake of theatrics, that I think has a lot to do with politics. I think we also talk about the juiciness and the salaciousness of a lot of what happens in politics in the ways that like it almost plays like a script. Like I think that's why people love Scandal, is that it's just like, Jesus, like I couldn't have written this better myself. But I think when it comes to black political theater, we have to be a little bit reluctant to associate political theater to traditions that we've had in our culture, methods and strategies of resistance, ways of talking and presenting that are presented because stylistically black people just do it differently. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so I'm reluctant to call those instances political theater, largely because I think it erases why we have had to express and speak. We are soulful people, right? Are we not people who talk with a little bit more jazz and razzle dazzle and pizzazz and the average bear? And are those things always necessarily bad? I don't think.
Don't make me that nigga to you.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, I get it. It's not whatever year, and it wasn't a church house, but people have their habits, their tendencies. And I think contextually we can understand why people do the things that they do without calling it performance, without calling it political theater. And I want to shout out Winter Dragon. I want to shout out Winter Dragon real quick. I wasn't trying to poop on "We Shall Overcome." It's a beautiful song. It's a union song. It is a rally song that has allowed and continues to allow a lot of people to come together and mobilize under one voice. So I'm not trying to poke holes in that part of it, but I think in the context of the kind of papering over the actual issue of kids being killed at a Christian school. Like all that we shall overcome, cool, but no, we ain't overcoming shit right now. I don't think we're not there, right? And I get
like
the hope and optimism invested in that song, but more than anything, I just feel like it was just not responsive to the moment. We are talking about common sense. These are not difficult ideological questions that we have to ask about the value of people. We're talking about killing and shooting kids, and so they were on the same side of that issue, and I appreciate that. But I think it's just a fatigue. I'm just so tired of those types of performative gestures toward the issue.
So this is why I want to be clear. I am a Justin Jones, Justin Pearson fan.
This is interesting.
I support them niggas and what they do. And I support them holding office. If there was any way that I could vote for them for whatever office they run for, I would.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to be clear.
Go ahead and be a hater.
Don't ruin my shit like that. It's black, Toya. It's black political theater. Winter Dragon. I apologize, but "We Shall Overcome" was what Dr. King was singing. If we're still singing the same songs Dr. King was singing, it means that the efforts that Dr. King put forth wasn't enough, and I'm not willing to say that. I'm not willing to say that Dr. King's efforts wasn't enough. I think that Dr. King sang "We Shall Overcome," so we didn't have to. And standing in an airport singing "We Shall Overcome," it's the epitome of black political theater, because what it does is it taps into, and what we'll discuss in a second in terms of like black liberation theology, but it taps into the ways in which black people historically have leaned on religious institutions, religious beliefs, and religious ideologies to help us frame our political and social perspective. But where we are in 2023 is that's not necessarily needed the way it was in the 60s during when Dr. King was singing it and marching. And the reason why I say that is because our institutions expect that. Our institutions respect Dr. King. Our institutions, the reason why we hear "We Shall Overcome" is because the institutions that dictate our society have said that that's something that we are finding acceptable. That's something that we think is the people. The man is saying that's an acceptable level of resistance. Because when Dr. King was singing it, he was a troublemaker. When we sing it today, we're doing it in a legacy of somebody who's revered in this country.
I also think it. Go ahead. That means what?
Oh yeah. So that means that we got to do something a little bit different, because the goal isn't to make them comfortable. We don't want them clapping like, yeah, sing that shit. We don't want them doing that. We want uncomfortability, right? We want them to have to deal with like feeling the pushback. "We Shall Overcome" was pushback to Jim Crow. Jim Crow no longer exists. We overcame Jim Crow. So when we sing, so "We Shall Overcome" no longer fits the struggle of today, of 2023.
But the part of and I might be giving too much credit and credibility to it, but I think why, even as I kind of hate on "We Shall Overcome" being sung, I'm in a position of flux over all of this, because I also think it is very haunting, right? And we talk about hauntology in Black critical theory, right, as a conversation about how our ancestors kind of shape and are always ever present with us as we evolve, as we move forward, as we attempt to create new means of resistance. And I think it is very haunting to hear the same song sung 50 years ago still be repeated, still be sung as people sing arm in arm. I also think outside of the performativity of it, there is something palpable, right, about how eerie it is that the same songs are being sung with the same general messages that people deserve to live free and be free and to have freedom. In this particular instance, is kids should have the freedom to go to school and to not be targeted or mowed down, and people should have the right to go to work without being mowed down by ridiculous people with guns. But I think there is a part of that too that says the reason why we still singing these same ass songs is that we still dealing with these same ass stupid issues, and that we are in the spin cycle. Right. Miss Ma'am chimes in on the Black political theater question and says, I don't think it's so much Black political theater as it is that's the biggest example of, as Black people, we have to go off of political stages. Right. So less political theater and more of these are the images that we see. And I think with, you know, the relationship that a lot of people have constantly seen of a lot of our Black political figures have also been religious leaders, right? I think there's just a level of tiredness and fatigue and exhaustion with that being what is going to be the path to get us out. There are people who are just kind of tired of that being the playbook or the framework that is being used to accompany what Black liberation looks like.
And I think that's what I'm speaking to. Is just more so like the level of like I have nothing but the utmost respect for the legacy of the civil rights movement and the Civil Rights Act, but it's important to recognize that the Civil Rights movement accomplished its goals. The Civil Rights Act, as much as we ignore, like the Civil Rights Act is known as the most important piece of legislation in the history of our government. It made equality the law of the land. You cannot use public institutions, public units of anything as a way to discriminate. That's significant, extremely significant. So that, like, with them accomplishing that significant goal, we now have to find ways to challenge the way that racism and things like that operate in a world where equality is the law of the land.
Yeah.
Right? J Universe says that's why I get pessimistic. I feel you. We still fighting the fight that's been going on since before I was born. And that's why I want to point out the reason why we think it's the same fight is because we singing the same songs. The difference between back then and today is your political enemy will sing "We Shall Overcome" with you. That's the problem. And look, I'm gonna say this real quick, Toya. I'm gonna just add this real quick because what we gotta remember is that when the Justins were expelled, that happened, and everybody involved knew that they was always gonna get their seat back. Because the system had been set up to make sure that even if somebody's rude or unfairly kicked out of the legislator, the rules, the system said that the community gets to decide who goes back. So they already knew they had the community on their side, and that community was going to send them right back. So as much as we want to be like, see, this is a problem with the system, we can't necessarily say that because the system was set up to ensure that whatever unfairness they dealt with in the well will be taken care of in their local communities. That's why they ended up sending back. They knew they were going to go back, right? And so that's why it's like we got to change our approach to challenging these things, because now our criticism of the system is undermined because the system made sure that they got back to where they were.
I see that. I mean, I think one thing that I was thinking about, and this is or isn't related to what you just said, but I think it dovetails with something you mentioned a couple minutes ago, is that, and this is what is an enigma to me, because we can criticize, we shall overcome. And I'm talking, I hope I'm clear to the people listening. If it sounds like I'm flip-flopping back and forth about how I feel about things, it's because this is a very in the gray issue for me. I'm thinking it through it and about it in real time, because I'm trying to figure out what we do with these moments. Case in point, people can be over "we shall overcome" and sick of hearing it or whatever, but and then Miss Ma'am even said, can we get a Sway to God flip on "we shall overcome"? Like, can we get a new mix of that thing, like a chopped up and never slopped up mix version of the song? And I begin to think about how I think people feel like everything is so corny and so whack. I don't think there is a remix of "We Shall Overcome" or even a new fight and rally song that people would get behind, particularly Black people, because they like, yeah, that's corny, that's whack, we don't want to do none of that. And so I think a lot of even the more innovative strategies that individuals have tried to use to gain the attention of the masses or to mobilize and come together, even protest. Black people like, man, I'm sick of you doing that and locking arms and walking in the street and shit. That don't do nothing. That don't materialize anything. And so it's just like, people who are damned if they do and damned if they don't. I think that's why public expressions of spirituality and, you know, guidance from God and faith and I have joy and I'm happy right now, like those places are places people end up landing back on, because those are the only places where you see people really just get turned up and get excited, right? You go to a Christian church and find somebody who feels like God is touching their heart, they get more turned up than anybody I've seen on any street, ready to change or challenge. So you know what I'm saying? Or just as turned up. You know what I'm saying? So like, I mean, I really feel like it's just like we got to choose. Either the old school methods are good and we just need a remix and we need to go back to some of those strategies and re-innovate those and do things, or y'all got a new, better idea, and y'all gonna pull up on us and use that. But something has to give, and something has to happen. And I think the Justins have just resorted to using strategies and techniques and just embodying various performances, not performances, but various politics, strategies, and methods.
Right.
That speak to what they're looking for.
And now for those who don't know, Toya's a legend in the policy debate community. For those who don't know, Toya is one of those people that if you bring up Toya Green in policy debate, people are gonna melt because how much they love her. Now she built her name on making arguments around Black liberation theology.
Right, it's amongst a couple different arguments, right? But
I mean, that one to me is, I feel like it stood out because uniquely debate is a very secular, a white secular space. So to make arguments about Black liberation theology is full resistance, you know what I mean, against the kind of like the pedagogy of policy debate. So I feel like you would be more of an expert in this to kind of break this down real quick. So I want to ask you, do you believe that like Black Christianity and Black liberation theology have a place in social and political resistance today?
I do, even outside of people, you know, in their criticisms of Christianity, it is undeniable the role that the Black church has uniquely played in the resistance, freedom, and liberation strategies of the Black community, right? James Cone, who is the theorist and social scientist that gives credence to the Black theoretical, Black liberation theology. I don't know why I'm getting so tongue twisted, but James Cone, who formulated this kind of theory, is the one who describes or explains the ways that Black churches uniquely have always existed as not only houses of faith, but locations where individuals are able to get their political knowledge. We know historically, and even to this day, Black churches are where a lot of people in our communities go to vote, that those are the same places that politicians have stopped by and come through and see about, because they understand that Black people collectivize in those communities. So for a lot of people, and a lot of times during local elections, those are the only ways you get close to your constituents and to the people who are leading your particular areas and districts. We also know that Black communities have been places a fortress for Black organizing, that oftentimes they do provide food, provide shelter, provide housing. As many criticisms as we have about the preacher having their money in the pockets of the people and things like that, Black churches have been cornerstones of outreaches and activisms in our communities for generations. And because of Black liberation theology, right, the one of the principal tenets of it is that their Blackness actually becomes before their Christianity. That Blackness and identity is such a cornerstone of the reality of Black people in this country, that their identity or their faith is filtered through how they get to experience and actualize that faith, right? So their Blackness becomes an important kind of referendum for how we see Christianity play out, how we come to understand the commands that have been given by Christ in the Bible, and ultimately the agenda that we have to serve our communities and attend to those needs, right? So there's a bunch of different ways that Black liberation theology has been used and explained. Most recently, if y'all think back to the Obama campaign, and Jeremiah Wright was one of the more present or visible Black liberation theologists that we've seen in recent times. And that's because both he and Cornel West were having very vibrant conversations right now about how God was looking at our country, whether God was blessing or damning our country for its issues, for its flaws, for the ways that it's treated marginalized people, particularly Black people. And so we've seen Black liberation theology interwoven into conversations that we've had over time, even outside of and since Reverend Jeremiah Wright and Cornel West, right? So just a lot of questions and conversations about the backbone of the faith being the backbone of our community.
So, and I'm a little bit more of a heathen than Toya is.
Yeah,
but I do want to be. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But I do want to make sure that I let it be known that I think politics requires like performative aspects of it. So like saying that it is Black political theater, is it demonizing it? That's the one thing I do want to get clear. Because again, as a youth pastor, as a youth pastor myself, I do feel that like how we present information is uniquely us, and because we are spiritual people, like especially us that grew up in the church, which kind of prompted that tweet that we saw. It's like when you hear that type of message, it's supposed to resonate. You know what I mean? You're supposed to tap in, not just politically, but spiritually. And I feel like that's what he was touching on. The thing I think is the uniqueness about Black political theater as opposed to traditional political theater or normative political theater is that normative political theater has no real relationship with anybody or anything. It's only meant to push or create a narrative. Black political theater, think of it like a Medea play. You felt that shit.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't, you know, the plays was better than the movie, but you know, the movies, but what the purpose of it was that there was gonna be a message that resonated. That's why Black liberation theology was so important, was because it wasn't just that that you felt good by him and the pastor, but it resonated like through your experiences, like how you lived, like, right. And so it pushed you forward in a form of resistance that it reflected both our social circumstances, but also our a spiritual revival. You know, we went through, like we go through evolutions when we hear like that type of message, like delivered that way. The one thing I say, and I'll pass it off to you, is that I believe, however, that we owe it to our ancestors to evolve, like the tradition that they gave us. Like, I think Dr. King wouldn't want us still singing "We Shall Overcome." Dr. King would want us to have our own mantra that reflects and represents the Black experience of 2023. Because the white man, the white government, the laws, the politics that Dr. King experienced, we not doing him no favors by saying we experienced that same white man. Because when we go out there singing "We Shall Overcome," we not getting no water hoses. They put us on the news. When we go out there, we saying "We shall overcome," we go viral. Which means that it's not reflecting the resistance, because like Gil Scott Heron said, like the revolution shouldn't be televised. So if it's something that's occurring that's shifting the social perspective and the social understanding, then it definitely should not be something that major media corporations are willing to put on their platforms. It should be something that speak against it. But I will say, and then I'll pass it to you. Cable news and all that type of shit is a part of just the political game, period. And so it's a thin line that we have to kind of like play between. But I do think, though, with as much respect that I have for the Tennessee Justins, I definitely argue that we and them should work towards evolving what our political resistance looks like.
Okay, and then I think this is my last kind of thought on this conversation before we start to close it and move. But I will say this: as we consider ways to evolve our strategies, as we consider ways to innovate and captivate and do a justice to the activisms that we have in our hearts, I would like to warn Black people and people on the right side of right in general to not have this like secondhand embarrassment, I guess, behind individuals who are on the front lines doing the work, grinding and finding their own relationship to how it is that they work to liberate our people, regardless of the cause, whether it's about Black people, whether it's about gun violence, whether it's about police brutalities, whether it's about how women and non-cis men are being treated in this society. Regardless of it, I think that, you know, I'm in a weird place because my first impulse was to laugh and crack up when I heard "We Shall Overcome." My first impulse was to be like, bro, you was doing all this shouting and shit and people not really gonna be able to understand it. But I had to check myself because I think it's a question of respectability, right? I think when we get the secondhand embarrassment, or when we have these responses to these types of approaches and strategies of protest and things like that, what it is you kind of being ashamed and scared and kind of secondhand embarrassed because either it's not something you would have done, or, and I think more importantly and more problematically, and more anti-Blackly, you're more concerned about what the white people are going to think when they see niggas shouting and when they see people, singing and doing what they want to do and resorting to some of these strategic tactics. You're like, ooh, that makes me feel uncomfortable. And I don't like it because I think that they think, who gives a shit about what they think? And I think a lot of our resistance and a lot of our freedom is going to be predicated off of getting away from what other people think about. I think that holds us back a lot. And I think that it does so on a personal level, on an interpersonal level, and on a socio-political level. And so to be all cringe or whatever about either something. And it's okay if you opted out of Christianity. It's okay if you've opted out of traditional policy, politicking and policy making and the ways that these conversations play out. That's cool. But you don't have to yuck other people's yums, right? You don't, especially if you're not out there with your own strategies and your own relationships and your own orientations and your own theoretical backgrounds, then I think you don't really get the right to be like, oh, I don't like how you did that, because what are you doing? What have you innovated? What strategies have you provided? And what ways have you linked up to them, tapped into them, and being like, here is something out? Like, nobody's doing that work. So when it's all said and done, it takes audacity, it takes energy, it takes investment, it takes love for your people to get up behind the mic. It takes that same love to, have that unabashedly, unashamed proclamation of faith and of joy and of hope and of spiritual. It takes some gumption, it takes some energy. So we behind our keyboards, we behind our computers criticizing people who are out there doing the work. And we can't never forget that. And we definitely can't sit up here and be ashamed of them or be embarrassed and, kind of pull back and retreat from what they're doing because it makes us uncomfortable, right? They're doing a whole lot more for them kids that should have never got killed at that school. When it's all said and done, we talk about people who are putting on and going up, not for their own political agendas, not because they're trying to line their own pockets, not because they have some political agenda to get on some radar for the future. No, they are pissed off, confused, perplexed, upset, and unapologetic, right, about the ways that young children and people are dying doing regular shit that our society said that we not only need to be able to do, but are supposed to be doing. Kids supposed to go to school. People supposed to go to work. And they getting killed doing stuff that they supposed to be doing. How much sense does that make? Yeah. So you can hate the way that they are criticizing those things, but you can't get away from the fact that at least they're the ones doing the criticizing. That's me.
Yeah, so yeah, as we start to close out, I think what's important that I think we able to recognize as past debaters, as a debate coach, somebody that's still in the policy debate community, is that this dialogue is necessary for growth and development. And while I'll straight up say I support Justin Jones and Justin Pearson.
No justice, no peace.
Stop.
To be clear,
but at the same time, like whenever I hear it, like even I do spoken word. One day I may drop one of my spoken words on the platform, whatever.
Why not?
I don't do the I live my life trying to understand. I don't talk like that, yo. Like even when I was a preacher, like I didn't talk like that, right? Like I talked how I talk. Now that may not be fair because like I've been known as naturally being a good speaker, and so I'm able to do me, right? But ultimately, I believe that we if we really want to show respect to our ancestors and they struggle, and the things that like the people from just our recent ancestors, just the civil rights movement, because a lot of them are still alive, people. A lot of those people who experienced the civil rights movement, or a lot of them are still here.
Yeah,
right. And
it wasn't that long ago.
Right. And now we are approaching that age to where a lot of them, you know what I'm saying, like are up there in age, but what we have to recognize is that the goal for what they were doing was to lay the foundation. They don't want us doing what they did. They want us doing things that reflect the politics of today. We're not dealing with the same white man.
Yeah,
the white man today will hear that preacher shit and be like, he's a great speaker, right? They'll hear that preacher shit and be like, let's put that on the news. Let's give him an interview. And while somebody like Justin Pearson, definitely, and Justin Jones, they need all the platforms they can get. Black people, like young Black people across the country, need to hear them brothers. But at the same time, don't mimic or mock, or not necessarily mock, but you don't want to regurgitate or mimic what it is that they're doing. How can you show a different side of that, a different reflection of that? Black liberation theology, Donnell said that's true too. It should really come down to what your contribution is and understanding that there's more than one approach to the revolution. Just make sure you're doing your part. Exactly. So even so when you have people that are critical of Justin Jones and people that are critical of Justin Pearson, our criticism should not be of them. And we shouldn't, and actually, we shouldn't have any criticism of how they move. If we want politics to be reflected and look a particular way for Black communities, we should be those examples. Them are some niggas in Tennessee. I'm sure that it's a bunch of black people in Tennessee, as we saw in the video, that resonates with. So if we like, okay, I want to resonate with politics for people that look like me. All right, I don't need to talk like Dr. King.
Yeah,
but I still need to make sure that I'm moving with the energy and I'm moving in line with Justin Pearson. I'm moving in line with Justin Jones, even if I think I don't need to sound like that. Even if I think that my community don't sound like that.
I'll allude to some of the other criticisms. I know we're wrapping this up to get done, but a lot of people over the course of Justin Pearson's tenure have been like, "Oh, why you got that haircut? You got that afro? You look goofy, my nigga. This ain't the 70s, whatever." He also has shown up, in dashikis with suit coats over him and was
criticized.
And it's cool. If you don't want to put the shiki on, don't put the shiki on. But understand that where dashikis come from on our continent, that is considered to be professional wear and attire. It is what you put on when you want to go to public spaces and be seen as reputable, as respectable, and as dignified, right? Their shirts don't have collars on them with buttons going down the middle. That's just not what that looks like. I have taught in dashikis. You didn't used to debate in dashikis, but me and the Conscious League and Brother She used to debate in dashikis, right?
Shout out to political or Perfect Prophet. Shout out to Perfect Prophet. Go ahead.
Shout out to the Perfect Prophet, definitely, because they, for a while, had an era in college policy debate where wearing the dashiki with the J's was the thing to do. I got my style points from them, but if that's not for you, it's just not for you. That doesn't mean it has to be criticized.
Lee was my brother. Lee is my brother. Like when we debated, even though we had different debate partners, but like we were still inseparable. Like the only time we were separate is when niggas was doing our debates with our own partners. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the only time that. But you're not gonna catch me in a dashiki. But it doesn't have to do with because I feel away with dashikis and all those other things. I just don't feel like it's my politic. But with somebody wearing a dashiki on the floor of the Tennessee legislature, that is a specific politic that I'm always going to support. Like the legacy of Dr. King being reflected on the floor of the Tennessee legislature, that's something I'm always going to support. Even if I don't sound like that, I'm going to stand behind it. Because ultimately, I know that what the Tennessee Justins are doing is something that is to the benefit of Black people as a whole. The image of that afro, the image of that ponytail, because Justin Jones is half Filipino, and so they know what their history are and their legacy is. And one thing that we when we came up, that was a part of our political maturation was being counter hegemonic.
Yes,
that means is representing a force, representing an influence that goes against the normative powers that operate that we operate within. Wearing that afro, wearing that dashiki pushes back against the normative representations of what power looks like. Because wearing that dashiki is a reflection of Blackness and a white power structure. Yeah. Now I can go on my Black nationalist pro-Black shit, but we're gonna keep it. We're gonna give y'all light work today. You know what I mean? I may not be a nigga that'll wear a dashiki, but I swear to God, I'll fight for a nigga that will wear one in front of in Congress. I'll fight for a dashiki in the White House. I'll fight for a dashiki in any state legislature in any state capital.
Yeah.
Right? Like Miss Ma'am said, it is the open display of representation of Black for me, because we live in a country that tells us that when you distance yourself from Blackness, that's when you're able to succeed. When you're able to remove yourself from Blackness. Universe said, I just had to Google what a dashiki was.
We still love you, Jay. We still got love for you, Jay. Don't you worry about a thing.
No, it's love. We love Jay Universe and we love his cat. But
we're gonna take a black card. You good with us? You good with us?
But listen, I don't care if a nigga showed up with a Allen Iverson jersey, some 3 times pants. You know what I'm saying? And some Air Force Ones on the floor. I'm gonna fight for that nigga too, because that is a representation of Blackness. Anytime we able to represent and stand for and support Black people as a whole, God damn it, that's what I'm doing. Even if it's not my Blackness.
Yeah.
Even if it ain't what my Blackness look like. So Toya, I'm gonna give you the last words on this one.
My last words are the same as they were a couple moments ago. Quit getting secondhand embarrassment from niggas out there doing the work. It'll take you a whole lot further. It don't really matter as long as people out here getting it in and doing that work and showing up for the call when the call gets put out. And that's what you know, for better or for worse, a lot of individuals do. We can be critical, and a whole nother conversation is whether or not we even support, you know, people like Justin Jones and Justin Pearson using their political energy in spaces like that are automatically going to undermine and be disingenuous to their purpose and their mission, right? There are conversations about whether or not Black policymakers, you know, are you know, not worth supporting, but whether or not that type of work and political energy is where Black people should be putting their political energy and political capacity too, right? There's a lot of things that could be said, but at the same time, I'm not going to sit up here and go too hard on them because I don't know what it means to sit in a room with other Tennessee white policymakers and have to hold the line and be about your business and represent your politics and defend yourself and defend who you are and defend your culture at every turn. So as much as I don't really agree with the state, with the institutions, I don't think they're going to change. I don't think they're going to make better laws and legislation and gun violence or anything else. At the same time, I know that is one of many front lines we have to be on the fight. And if I'm not going to show up to fight on that hoe, I definitely need to be careful, right, about how critical I am for the people who do. So again, be careful who you put your mouth on. Be careful about how you position yourself to get secondhand embarrassment about something you're not even willing to go out there and create an alternative to.
Definitely be careful who you put your mouth on.
You definitely be careful who you be careful who you put your mouth on.
But yeah, hey, but don't be out here
it's what we always say though. We ain't no monolith. Live and let live. Just always hold that ass accountable. And that's a word
that ass accountable.
Period.
Thank you.
Period.
You know what I'm saying? Hey, so with that being said, it's real Black leftists, right? Real Black leftists. Hey, shout out to you. Real Black leftists understand that Blackness does not look like anything specific, that it's not a monolith, and that we're fighting for the freedom, right, and the autonomy of Black people throughout this country. So we'd like to thank y'all for being a part of another chop up. We're not gonna see y'all next Thursday. I got my anniversary, so we're not gonna see y'all next Thursday, but the Thursday after that, I'll probably do a live or something. Y'all know I'll be popping up. I got some plug explains I want to do, so y'all see me shortly. But with that being said, we're gonna close the show the way we start the show. We out.